in on disengagement between India and China along the LAC. 5 of the tents have now been removed. In the latest, the previous report came in on 1 tent that was removed. 5 more at this point has been confirmed to be taken off. In fact, on both sides, India and China deciding to quash some of those tents that were placed in violation of India's sovereignty. Half of the temporary structure has been removed in Debsang as well along the LAC. As of Thursday night, nearly half the work has already been done. Once all tents and temporary structures are fully taken off, a joint verification process is set to begin. Well, this is a big update and a massive success. After 5 years of friction, we're looking at India-China seeing a thaw in relations, and that's reflecting in the border's de-escalation as well. To begin with, the patrolling arrangements have been done. Tents have now been taken off. What's the significance? I'm going to bring in Gaurav Sawant, who's currently in Moscow, to bring us a lot more on that story. Gaurav, we're looking at the bilateral talks between China and India. Modi and Xi Jinping has finally translated to effective pullback on the ground by China as well. Give us more on what's the significance.
So this is big. It's a very significant first step that's been undertaken. For the past 5 years, Indian and Chinese soldiers had been stalling each other's movement forward to their respective claim lines or patrol points. And 5 years is a long time. Of course, in Debsang and Demchok, some of these are legacy issues that have lasted even longer. India was stalling China's advance to about 1.5 kilometers short of Butse, which is the Chinese claim line, and China was stopping India from patrolling beyond the bottleneck. There's an area there from Y Junction to Raki Nala, and at that Nala there's a very, very narrow bottleneck where the Chinese had brought in multiple vehicles and they hadn't pitched tents in that area, but between several vehicles they had put tarpaulins and camouflage nets, and Chinese soldiers were sitting there preventing Indian soldiers from going up to our patrolling points. And there are multiple in this area, from patrol point 10 to 11, 11 Alpha, 12, 12 Alpha and 13. They were stalling our advance to all these points because that's the only way Indian Army could have got to the Debsang bulge, from where it is effective claim of India that this is where our LAC lies, and it's just LAC. It's because the entire Aksai chain technically belongs to India in illegal Chinese occupation. Similarly, in Demchok, both sides had pitched tents. After the conversation between diplomats and military commanders on both sides, and here in Russia, the conversation that took place between the Chinese President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, that process of removing those vehicles at Debsang and tents at Demchok has started. Some vehicles have been removed from the Chinese side. Some tarpaulins and camouflage nets have been taken down, we are told. Others, it's still a gradual process because this is mutual, disengagement. So China pulls back some, we pull back some. Both verify, then again China pulls back more, we pull back more, then there is verification, and then ultimately there is joint verification that ultimate disengagement has taken place, and our troops go up to our patrol points and their troops come up to their claim line. That is when the disengagement process and April-May 2020 scenario would be completely restored. But This is only a very crucial step 1, Nabila. Step 2 and step 3 are yet to be undertaken.
Gaurav, I'd request you to stay with us. I'm going to also bring in retired Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, former Chief of Staff, 14 Corps. Let me thank you, sir, for joining us right here on India Today. If you could give us your take on the disengagement that we believe has already begun on both sides. India and China has decided to pull back along the LAC. 5 of the tents that were temporarily set up has now been demolished, with now commitment that patrolling will begin and troops will be pulled back days going forward. How big and how significant is this?
Definitely a positive development, and keeping in view with what the Prime Minister said, mutual trust, mutual respect and mutual sensitivity. I think both the countries are on the same line, and that is a very good sign, because these are all part of the confidence building measures. These are all part of ensuring peace and tranquility along the LAC. This is all part of reducing the tension which existed all along. I think a very, very positive development, because first and foremost, this disengagement is very, very important, because that itself leads to, the de-escalation over a period of time, and then subsequently you can see. But I would say part one, a positive development, and surely all the critics can now be told that, look, everything is happening as what had been discussed, and slowly and steadily things are moving in the right direction. Yeah.
Sir, we're looking very closely at India-China ties. Now, the border issues at this point, if at all it stands resolved, then India and China can get back to cooperating with business. That took a big hit by and large. Do tell us on the stance that India took for the 5 years that China constantly threatened India's sovereignty by pushing their forces, violating the border lines. The stand that the Indian army took for 5 long years, the struggles that we went through.
See, what happens is, frankly speaking, this is what surprises me, that these 5 years should not have been the way they have been. For a very simple reason, because I've seen it before, and things were very good. Minor irritants are always resolvable, and that is why there are all kinds of agreements. You have a Peace and Tranquility Agreement 1993 and subsequent agreements going up to 2013. So it's very essential. All these agreements must be adhered to, and there was no requirement. I think this was absolutely avoidable. Absolutely avoidable. These 5 years unnecessarily, totally avoidable, and now hopefully all of it will get resolved, and also tells us that we must, be looking at it definitely. There is no tension. It's so much better for both the sides. Obviously, both the sides are operating at such great altitudes under such, inhospitable conditions. But when these things are there, and when there is no tension, vigilance, yes, by all means. Nobody is going to be dropping guard. Vigilance is very important. Surveillance is very important, but no tension. And this is what it leads to. And when there is no tension along the LAC, it would lead to automatically, a good relationship between the two countries, leading to better economic upliftment, better trade, better things will move in. Because, whenever I remember my times, whenever we would move, and should there have been a problem, if I had a packet of biscuits with me, I would share a packet of biscuits with them. If they were quite close to me, if I had tea in my flask, I would share my cup of tea. If they would share their cup of tea. So it was a very mutual thing, and if we can return to those days, so much better, because it's good for both the countries, because we are neighbors, and neighbors cannot afford to be, constantly having tension with each other.
Yeah.
And good neighborly relations help both the countries. A win-win situation.
Excellent. Sir Kulkarni, thank you very much for giving us your expertise on that. We know that now there's been commitment from China to pull back, and as per word, 5 tents along the LAC has now been demolished, the temporary tents that were set up. It was a statement indeed that both countries were making. We hear that a few from China's side and one from India's side has now been pulled off. Patrolling now will begin, and eventually disengagement of troops will follow. Now, as we see, disengagement process altogether has begun in Ladakh days after India and China reached an agreement to end the standoff between the armies. Both Indian and Chinese troops have already begun disengagement at LAC. 1 tent on each side and temporary structures. Now we hear the tent number has increased to 5. 5 tents on the whole now has been dismantled, with Indian soldiers moving back to the west side of the Charding Nala, while Chinese soldiers retreating on the east side of the Nala. On Thursday, the Chinese army reduced the number of their vehicles in the area, and the Indian army has also withdrawn some troops. There are about 10 to 12 temporary structures and around 12 tents on both sides, which are all set to be removed now going forward. During the key bilateral meeting that Prime Minister Modi had with Xi Jinping, he welcomed the disengagement process between the two countries and said India will stand committed to its word.
सीमा पार पिछले 4 वर्षों में उत्पन्न हुए मुद्दों पर बनी सहमति का हम स्वागत करते हैं। सीमा पर शांति और स्थिरता बनाए रखना हमारी प्राथमिकता रहनी चाहिए। म्यूचुअल ट्रस्ट, म्यूचुअल रिस्पेक्ट और म्यूचुअल सेंसिटिविटी हमारे संबंधों का आधार बने रहना चाहिए।
India and China have been involved in talks both at diplomatic and military levels. to resolve their differences in certain areas along the LAC. Pursuant to the talks, broad consensus has been achieved to restore ground situation based on the principles of equal and mutual security. The consensus achieved includes patrolling and grazing to traditional areas. This is the power of engaging in continuous dialogue because sooner or later solutions will emerge.